Welcome to Have You Read It? The channel where we bring books to life, one summary at a time. Today we're diving into Jonah Berger's insightful book, The Catalyst: How to Change Anyone's Mind. This book isn't about forceful persuasion or slick sales tactics. It's about a much more subtle yet powerful approach to change, removing roadblocks. Berger argues that instead of pushing harder, we should focus on understanding why people haven't changed already, and then address those underlying barriers. He uses the analogy of a car that won't move. Sometimes it's not about needing more gas, it's about releasing the parking brake. Berger introduces the concept of social catalysts, drawing a parallel to catalysts in chemistry. Just as chemical catalysts accelerate reactions by lowering the activation energy, social catalysts facilitate change by reducing the barriers that prevent people from taking action. He argues that inertia, the tendency for things to stay as they are, is a powerful force in human behavior, much like Newton's laws of motion applied to the social world. The book outlines 5 key roadblocks to change, which Berger calls the 5 horsemen of inertia, and offers strategies to address each. These strategies form the acronym REDUCE. The first roadblock is reactance. This is the deeply ingrained human resistance to being persuaded. When we feel pushed, we tend to push back. Berger explains that this is rooted in our fundamental need for autonomy and control. Think about the infamous Tide Pod challenge. When Procter & Gamble tried to warn people, especially teens, about the dangers of ingesting Tide Pods, it inadvertently made the challenge more popular. This highlights reactance in action. The more we're told not to do something, the more tempting it becomes as a way to reassert our freedom. Berger uses this example, along with many others, to illustrate how direct persuasion often backfires. He argues that instead of trying to convince people, we should focus on creating an environment where they persuade themselves. He outlines 4 strategies for reducing reactance: providing a menu of options, asking questions instead of making statements, highlighting a gap between people's actions and their beliefs, and perhaps most importantly, starting with understanding. Providing a menu gives people a sense of agency while still guiding their choices. Asking questions encourages people to articulate their own reasons for change, increasing buy-in. Highlighting a gap, like the Thai anti-smoking campaign where children asked adults for a light, leverages people's desire for consistency between their actions and their beliefs. And starting with understanding, a tactic borrowed from hostage negotiators, builds trust and rapport, making people more receptive to change. The second roadblock is endowment. This refers to our tendency to overvalue what we already have. We're attached to the status quo, even if it's not ideal, simply because it's familiar. The book explains the classic mug experiment, where people who were given a mug demanded a significantly higher price to sell it than people were willing to pay to buy it. This demonstrates the endowment effect. Ownership increases perceived value. Berger connects endowment to loss aversion, the principle that losses loom larger than gains. This explains why the benefits of a change often need to be significantly greater than the costs to motivate action. He emphasizes the importance of surfacing the costs of inaction, showing people what they're losing by sticking with the status quo. He also introduces the more drastic tactic of burning the ships, eliminating the possibility of returning to the old way of doing things, thereby forcing a forward focus. The third roadblock is distance. This refers to the gap between a person's current beliefs and the desired change. If the gap is too large, the new information falls into what Berger calls the region of rejection, and is likely to be ignored or even strengthen existing beliefs. He cites research showing that exposure to opposing viewpoints can actually increase polarization, rather than promoting moderation. To mitigate distance, Berger suggests 3 strategies: finding the movable middle, asking for less, and switching the field. Finding the movable middle means focusing on those who are already somewhat receptive to the desired change. Asking for less, or chunking the change into smaller, more manageable steps, gradually moves people toward the desired outcome. And switching the field involves finding common ground on a related issue and using that as a starting point to bridge the gap. The fourth roadblock is uncertainty. Change is inherently uncertain, and this uncertainty acts as a pause button, preventing action. Berger draws on Everett Rogers's work on the diffusion of innovations, highlighting the importance of trialability, how easy it is to try something new. He offers several strategies for increasing trialability: freemium models, reducing upfront costs, driving discovery, and making the change reversible. Freemium, as used by companies like Dropbox and Spotify, allows people to experience the basic version of a product or service for free, encouraging them to upgrade later. Reducing upfront costs, like Zappos' free shipping and returns, removes a key barrier to trial. Driving discovery brings the product or service directly to potential customers, increasing awareness and encouraging trial. And making the change reversible through lenient return policies or trial periods reduces the perceived risk. The fifth and final roadblock is a lack of corroborating evidence. For significant changes, one person's opinion often isn't enough. We need social proof, multiple sources confirming the value of the change. Berger discusses the translation problem. When someone recommends something, we have to translate what that recommendation means for us. He argues that corroborating evidence helps solve this problem by providing more data points. He emphasizes the importance of similarity and diversity in choosing sources of corroborating evidence. Similar others provide relevant information, while diverse sources add credibility and legitimacy. He also discusses the importance of timing, noting that concentrated exposure to multiple sources is more effective than sporadic exposure. Finally, he introduces the concept of sprinkler versus fire hose strategies, arguing that concentrated efforts are more effective for changes requiring substantial corroborating evidence. The overarching takeaway from The Catalyst is that change isn't about pushing harder, it's about reducing resistance. It's about understanding the barriers that prevent change and strategically removing them. It's about diagnosing the problem correctly and prescribing the right solution. Here are a few easy-to-remember heuristics. Remember the acronym REDUCE to address the 5 key roadblocks: reactance, endowment, distance, uncertainty, and lack of corroborating evidence. Think about the parking brake analogy. Sometimes the problem isn't lack of motivation, it's an unseen obstacle. Find the root. Don't just treat the symptoms. Diagnose the underlying cause of resistance. Ask, don't tell. Empower people to persuade themselves by asking questions, providing choices, and highlighting gaps. Make it easy. Reduce uncertainty by making the change easy to try, reversible, and supported by social proof. Thanks for watching. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button so you never miss our next book dive.